In April 1970, the world watched as a routine NASA mission turned into a life-or-death crisis. Apollo 13, America's third planned moon landing, became something no one expected: a desperate, high-stakes rescue mission. When astronaut Jack Swigert voice crackled over the comms with the now legendary words, "Houston, we've had a problem," what followed was not science fiction, but one of the most intense survival sagas in human history. In this episode of Lost History of Space, we unpack the real story behind the near-catastrophic failure, the improvised engineering, and the quiet moments of heroism that saved 3 astronauts from becoming permanent ghosts in the void. On April 11, 1970, astronauts Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Hayes launched aboard the massive Saturn V rocket. NASA was confident. The public was bored. After 2 successful moon landings, spaceflight had become background noise. Apollo 13 wasn't even aired live by major networks. There were no parades, no speeches, no primetime specials. But then, 2 days into the journey, everything changed. At 55 hours and 55 minutes, a routine stir of an oxygen tank triggered a massive explosion. The blast ripped through the service module, knocking out electrical systems, cutting water supply, and bleeding oxygen into space. In seconds, Apollo 13 went from lunar expedition to survival challenge. The command module Odyssey was dying, and they were more than 200,000 miles from home. What followed was not just a technical crisis, but a human drama playing out in the harshest conditions imaginable. Inside the crippled spacecraft, panic turned to precision. The crew had to shut down Odyssey to conserve power and retreat into the lunar module Aquarius. But Aquarius wasn't built for this. It was designed for 2 astronauts for 2 days, not 3 for 4. Inside, the temperature plummeted. Condensation covered the walls. The astronauts shivered in damp suits, their breath visible in the freezing air. To make things worse, the carbon dioxide filters in Aquarius weren't compatible with Odyssey's canisters. The crew was slowly suffocating on their own exhaled air. NASA engineers worked furiously to keep the men alive. In one of the most iconic moments in space engineering history, the ground team designed a solution to fit a square peg into a round hole, a makeshift scrubber built from plastic bags, cardboard, and duct tape. The ingenuity required to solve this was staggering, and the success of the fix was nothing short of miraculous. But even that didn't mean they were safe. The spacecraft's trajectory had to be adjusted manually, using the moon's gravity to slingshot back toward Earth. With guidance systems offline, Lovell had to eyeball alignments using a sextant and the stars. One miscalculation could mean endless drift into space. The return journey was not a straight path home. They had to perform mid-course corrections using short engine burns while improvising navigation. The astronauts, running on adrenaline and rations of less than 500 calories per day, dealt with exhaustion, nausea, and freezing conditions. Sleep was a luxury. Water was limited to a few ounces per day. Their bodies were breaking down, but their minds remained sharp. They became technicians, electricians, and survivalists, all while drifting in a damaged spacecraft hundreds of thousands of miles away. As Apollo 13 looped around the far side of the moon, the silence was deafening. They were completely cut off. No radio contact, no telemetry. It was during this period that the full gravity of the situation set in. Would they be able to come home? Was this the last time their voices would be heard? When contact was re-established, a wave of relief swept across mission control. But the next challenge loomed large: re-entry. The command module had been dormant for days and was covered in frost. Its systems were untested after the explosion. The timing had to be perfect. Too shallow, and they'd skip off the atmosphere. Too steep, and they'd burn. With just minutes of battery left, Odyssey powered back up. The cabin fogged with condensation. Switches were brittle with ice. The tension was unbearable. Re-entry came at 142 hours and 54 minutes after launch. The blackout, when Earth lost radio contact as they burned through the atmosphere, lasted longer than expected. Seconds dragged into eternity. People around the globe held their breath. Then parachutes. Splashdown in the South Pacific. 3 men alive. The world erupted in applause and tears. The recovery was fast. The USS Iwo Jima picked them up within minutes. Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Hayes stepped onto the deck, not as lunar explorers, but as survivors of one of the most incredible rescues in history. The headlines called it a miracle, but internally NASA was shaken. Memos revealed just how close they came to losing everything. The accident exposed design flaws, communication gaps, and a dangerous overconfidence in space systems. Apollo 13 forced NASA to overhaul everything, from tank wiring to contingency procedures. It also changed public opinion. The illusion of invincibility was gone. The moon no longer felt like a bold frontier. It felt like a distant and deadly risk. In the aftermath, the investigation into the explosion revealed a simple cause: damaged insulation on a thermostat switch inside the oxygen tank. A small oversight, magnified through the chain of space systems, nearly cost 3 lives. NASA faced public scrutiny, internal reckoning, and political pressure. But instead of folding, they adapted. Apollo 40 flew 9 months later with redesigned tanks, stricter safety protocols, and renewed caution. Apollo 13 became a case study for every future mission, from Shuttle to Artemis. Apollo 13 isn't just a space story, it's a human story. It's about the power of improvisation, the importance of systems thinking, and the grit of a team that refused to give up. 3 men went to the edge of disaster and were pulled back by ingenuity, duct tape, and determination. The astronauts were heroes, but so were the hundreds of engineers, scientists, and technicians who worked night and day to make their return possible. Most documentaries give you the headline. This is the story you were never told. This was not just survival. It was a triumph of collective intelligence, resilience, and the quiet courage of people doing their jobs under impossible conditions. And that's why Apollo 13 matters more than ever. Not because of what it failed to do, but because of how it came back.